How good's that, eh? FrAnKeNInTer's cab is completely rust free. Zero rust, apart from the bit in the dash. Zero rust apart from that. How happy am I? So the video that I hope that you're going to watch all of that follows is me doing that, doing everything you can see there. My face is dirty at the moment. I'm filthy because I've just finished the last piece of the rust repair. And I've been on this for weeks. And I do mention that I didn't want to go down the sandblast path for a budgetary reason. So I've been doing it by hand. Hey, this looks great. I'm really happy with it. Very satisfying. All I got to do now is 2 doors, 2 mud guards, a bonnet and a radiator support. But hey, my choice. So welcome, I'm Todd. This is Toxic Garage Customs. Thank you for joining me. If this is your first time here, this is FrAnKeNInTeR. This is my 1952 International L110. Now, the deal with FrAnKeNInTeR is this. Several years ago, I bought a Holden HJ 1-tonner chassis with a drivetrain in it, and then I decided I need to buy a cab. I need to find a cab for it. This is the cab that I found. Kept it in storage at a mate's place for a year. Eventually, he sold his property. I had to get it. I started building it on the side of the road on a car trailer. So I didn't actually have any room for it. Moved up here, been up here for about 18 months, got back into it. A couple of months ago, I got into the HJ chassis, and was doing some work to it. Was just about to start rebuilding all the front end and everything, and decided it was rubbish, rusty and bent. So we cut the chassis up, threw it away, put it in a scrap metal bin, bought a new chassis and rebuilt it. And there's about a 6-part series, maybe not that many, on me building that, and that wasn't that long ago. So why do I say all that? This project started because I bought a chassis that I ended up cutting up and putting in the bin. Projects, eh? And I couldn't be happier. I got a chassis just behind us that is ready to go, ready to have this guy put on it. And I decided partway through that I was going to do a full-blown body restoration on this. This thing is going to be smick. It's going to be very nice. So we're going to be having sealless glass, so flush glass that's going to be urethaned in. It's going to be V-grooved, so no joint, no bar in the middle. Going to have fast glass. We're going to have urethane windows in the back as well. And in the sides we're going to have one-piece glass there. But I'm actually probably repeating stuff that I've either said before, I'm going to say in the video. So I appreciate you being here. Why don't you grab yourself a nice warm adult beverage, or a cool adult beverage. Grab a comfy chair, put your feet up, and watch me get filthy and covered in metal dust and get frustrated with flux core welding. I'll catch you at the end. Enjoy. Luckily this body's in really good condition, so there's not a lot I need to sort of repair, weld up or whatever. But there is this where a mirror used to be, so I'm going to try banging this out flat. I'll clean it up and I'll make some little plugs to weld this up. If I have any issue with it, I might just cut the piece out and just replace a section. It might be easier, but I'll try and fix the holes first. I'll go around. There's little things like this that I see. Looks like there could be a little crack through there. So as I go along, if I see things like that, then I'll make a note of them and I'll fix them. I'll probably fill in the wiper hole here because I think it's unlikely that it's going to be any use with the new wipers, whatever they are. There's some rust down here, and obviously some damage, and a little bit of damage here from where I'd say it's been cut off of its original chassis. No, not by me. So there's a little dent down here. I'll go through and straighten up seams and things like that. Got to weld this up, which I've sort of panel beated a little bit. There's a few other little spots. As we know, I've already done some work on the roof and this pillar and so on. It came up pretty well. Good enough for body work. There are a couple of little dents in the back here, which I think will become more evident as I start stripping and so on. Down here, again, there's some of those overcut areas. There's something a bit funny going on with this lip here. What's it supposed to look like? Okay, it's meant to have like a little bit of a flat flange on it there. So I'll have a look at that. What else we got? There's a little, so I'm not sure if there's lead in this area here originally or something like that, because it's sort of similar. And then we've got obviously the rust inside the door pocket that I've alluded to before. So that area down there, which is hard to see at the moment. There's a million holes in the firewall, most of which I don't need. There's the dash. There's some other little holes for various things that were there, brackets and so on. Some more holes there. I've got to do some structural refabrication of what I've done over there. Some of that was temporary, and I was just getting it to the point where I could work with it. On the chassis, to get this under the chassis, I actually had to release this here. This pulled out a bit to stretch over the chassis. So it'll only sit out about 10 or 15 mil further than where it's meant to, but I'll worry about that once I'm back on the chassis. And so it's a little bit bent the back there as well. Got to fix this area. The door had been folded back, so there's a bit of a fold back crease through this area. So overall, as far as panel beading, welding and so on, not too much. This badge is broken, this thing here. If it wasn't, I'd use it. It is, so I'm not going to. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to remove this completely and fill in the holes. This will become a wall art memory. The actual international symbol there is only just visible. Would have been nice if it was in good condition. This one's a bit beaten up, and I'm going for a very streamlined look on this, so I'm probably going to take that off as well. When the time comes, while I'm doing bodywork, I'll try and gap everything up as best as I can to make it as consistent gaps throughout all areas. This guard is already in primer, epoxy, whatever it is from someone else. And looking through here, I can see some little cracks and things, so wouldn't be surprised there's some body filler under there, but we will find out. That will become more evident. A bit of a dent there. It's actually bent, kinked out a bit through here. So this is all the stuff I'm going to be working through. And there's a dent just there. Never noticed that before, there's a dent in the front of that. This is all the stuff I'm going to be working through, but I'm just going to be going panel by panel, bit by bit when it comes to actually worrying about finessing it. I'd say there's body filler in here as well. As I said, these guards are done previously, so I have no idea what's below that. But in the first place, I can go around, I can just start welding holes up and things like that. And if I get bored with that, I can go to something else. Because, as I've said a million times, there is a lot of work to do. Actually, I did find a little bit of rust up here as well. And I think I saw some... No. Sure, I'll find stuff. Once I start removing all this paint, things will start popping their head up. It's okay. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Well, I might as well grind something. I'm going to start on that piece there. those little plugs I was using this tool here. So I just worked out what size I wanted, and it was this one, which is about 5 mil. And it's just a matter of getting a piece of sheet in whatever size you want, popping it in there, and making a little plug. And that's what you end up with. Well, it's not perfect, and there's a little bit of an indentation around each weld, but there's going to be body filler anyway. So, like, I'm talking, it stands out a lot on the camera, but you can barely feel that. What I do need to work on is this part here. So I'm hoping that it's pretty simple. I'm going to come back to this point here somewhere, sort of duck out here, around there. I'm hoping that it doesn't sneak out too much further. I cut out that section there, and then there was some rust in the back area, so I just used my spot sand blaster to get in there and blast that clean in between the seam a little bit as well. Like, I could keep going forever, but I'm not. Covered absolutely everything in sandblast grit, including myself. But I did have a twin cast cartridge respirator on, because this stuff is not good for your lungs. So I'm now going to go through and put some rust converter in there, and while it's drying, I'll make up a patch for this, and then I'll start putting that in. Okay, cleaned up, rust converted and patched. I just picked up a bit of scrap that had lying around, already had a bend in it, and then I put on the shrinker stretcher to get a bit of a curve into it, welded it in from about there down to about there somewhere. New day. So moving along, last night, or yesterday, after doing those weld repairs, I decided I'd change tact a bit and start stripping some paint off. So this is what we had, and this is what I've got so far. So I've been using a variety of methods with this, and I'm just about to change methods once again. So I've been using strip discs on an angle grinder, strip discs on a little die grinder, and 80 grit on my DA. Now, you can probably see the place is an absolute mess. There is dust everywhere. But I'm making inroads on it. So I'm sort of patchy up here. This surface rust is harder to get off, obviously. The paint, because some of it's old paint, some of it's new paint that's been brushed on, it varies, but underneath it, it's pretty well protected at least. So you can see what I've done and what I haven't. And the red primer, which it's probably red lead, so pretty toxic. The old red primer was lead based. It is pretty hard to get off because it's done its job really well. What I'm going to be doing here, because quite frankly, I'm old and I've got sore shoulders and sore arms and a headache and sore neck from sanding for hours yesterday. So I'm going to mix it up a bit. I'm going to put some paint stripper on here and take it off with that, and then I'll finish it off with sand. It'll probably be good. It'll smell. I'll put a mask on, but there'll be a lot less dust. a mere 5 hours later, this is where I'm up to. Looks so much different, doesn't it? Okay, looks a bit different from the back. So what I've done is paint stripped. I've probably done it 7 times, I think now, and then wiped it down with thinners on a rag. So as you can see, it's come up pretty clean on the back here. You can see the side that I've sanded, the side that I haven't, and the actual areas where I've sanded and where I haven't. I've done the roof. Well, this side of it anyway, because I'd already done the other side. And as you can see, there's still a fair bit to do. I think basically that is sunburnt primer. So I've taken off the bulk of the paint, a couple of little spots here and there, and I've wiped it with thinners and so on, and that's about as good as it's going to get before I do something mechanical, as in sanding it or a strip disc. So that is where I'm going to be next. So far I'm probably in about the same amount of time with this as what I did on the other side with sanding discs and strip discs, but a lot less dust. I can listen to music when I'm doing this. Okay, it stinks, there's no doubt about it. I had a mask on doing both, had earmuffs on doing the sanding side, didn't have to have earmuffs on this side. It's, I guess, the less of the evils doing it with the paint strip. It stinks in here though, I have to say, but muchness really, time-wise. So I guess I'll jump onto the sander. Well, as you can see, I've been making some pretty good progress. So I've got a fair bit of this done. I think it's looking fantastic. The roof and the cowl here, it's got rust in the metal there. Well, I'm pretty sure it's rust. And you can see up the top here, when I say rust, like just a stain from it. And I've been trying to grind it out, but it's a lot of work and I'm worried about distorting the metal through too much heat. So I'm going to change tact on it, and I'm going to get a scourer, some phosphoric acid, metal conditioner, and try and scrub it. And scrub that rust right out of my hair. Okay, I'm a couple of minutes in. This is a 10-to-1 phosphoric acid and water mix. And what I'm doing is scrubbing it with the Scotch-Brite, and you can see the rust coming out of it. So I'm going to do this several times, but what I'm just about to do is wipe this off. I don't want to let it dry here, but I want to get rid of all this rust that I've scrubbed off, and then I'm going to scrub it again. So what I really want to do is keep it wet for 10-15 minutes, however long it takes, so that the phosphoric acid can really eat into that rust, and I can continue to scrub it off. And then I'm going to neutralize it with water, and then I'm going to immediately dry it with air, or with paper towels and air, so it doesn't rust. But you'll notice the difference. I only got to do half the roof in the first place. You'll notice the difference between what I have done and what I've not yet done once I come back to that. I've probably been going on the roof for about an hour, and you can see where I've been wiping the runoff stuff down there. You can see it's got a bit of a dullness to it now. I've got to make sure I clean and neutralize all of that. But if you look at the roof as it's coming up, so I've only done this side. I've probably scrubbed it and wiped it off maybe 10 times now, and as I said, about an hour. So you can see the side I haven't touched and the distinct line. So as it is, I've just wiped this off with a cloth a moment ago. I'm going to put some phosphoric acid on here and see if we can bring more rust out. Phosphoric acid doesn't cooperate with epoxy primer. Epoxy doesn't like it. So you can't put epoxy over the top of etch primer, for example, because etch primer has phosphoric acid in it. So what I want to ensure is that I'm going to get it all out of here. And not to mention, if you don't get it out, it will continue to do what you see there. It'll damage your paint, it'll bubble up, it'll eat away at the metal. So I want to get it out of all of these seams with water to neutralize it. Some people go as far as putting some bicarbonate of soda in there to completely neutralize it. Water should be just fine. And then once I've neutralized it all, then I'm going to get it bone dry. And then hopefully it's not going to spot rust. In these little seams like this, you can see there is still paint, corrosion, stuff in there. So what I'm doing, I'm going through there, and I'm just choosing to use a Stanley knife, but you could use anything sharp. I'm going through and making sure I dig out whatever I can that is like paint. And then the stuff that's on the surface here, I'm finding that if I go through, I can scratch some of it off. And the stuff that I am unable to scratch off, then I'm going to go through with an 80 grit and just go through. Why? Because that's the coarsest paper I've actually got at the moment. And go through and I'll clean that up. And then once I've done that, then I'll put a little bit of treatment there, clean it out, wash it out, and so on. It's these little areas that if there's any contaminant in here, anything, any rust or whatever, it's going to come back. It'll come out later on. Paint will start failing in that area. It'll start raising. It'll travel up the panel, down the panel, and basically I'm not going to be happy. But what I'm also going to do, and this vehicle didn't have it from new, what I'm going to do is after I get this all into epoxy, so I'm going to get all this clean, get epoxy into all these areas, I'm going to go through and I'll use a seam sealer on these. I don't want to hide the gap, I want it to still be there, but I want to stop the ingress of water in there. Potentially this stuff can come in from the inside as well, but that's the inside of the car. But there's all sorts of areas on this vehicle that I need to consider, like where all these panels join. And I'm not going to go through and seam weld everything, but I may go through and seam seal a lot of this stuff. Again, not to try and lose it, just to seal it up. Because when you start looking, there's actually quite a few of these sort of gaps around the place. So just to make it as good as I can. Well, sometime later, we're making some progress. Let's have a look at it. So I've gone through and, as I said, been cleaning up those really tight areas, including around the windscreen and so on. I've also started on the firewall, which has been pretty good. Again, some gap areas through here. I've cleaned the rust converter off here that I'd previously put there. I don't even know why I put it there, to be honest, had it left over. And then getting into areas like these gutters. So you can see very clean in there, individually cleaning the spot welds, getting on the back of the drip rail, all those lines. And I've had a bit more of a go at the top of the roof up here. I need to finish fabricating this area in here for the firewall, of the firewall for the steering column, and make a proper bracket for that and so on. So I'm going to pop the column and the mount and pedal mount and everything back in to this area here so that I can see exactly what I need to do. Then we'll spend a bit of time fabricating up a nice neat part to go into that area. And then as we can see, there's a zillion holes that need to be filled. Got our steering column bolted back in onto the breakaway mounts and the booster reinforcement mount coming through the firewall as part of that mount, which is also the brake pedal drop. So what I need to do is make a nicer version of that plate that goes between the column and the wall there, and I'll replace that plate down the bottom there as well at some stage. And also on the firewall side, I need to finish neatening it up. So you can see that now that I've got it all bare metalled, you can see where I patched in the piece, and I tried to finish these swage lines somewhat neatly so it didn't look like I'd just chopped through them. And where the steering column pops through the bottom there. So I've got to neaten all that hole up, and I've got to make sure I leave enough room for the column shift selector mechanism to pop through. So it's not just going to be a round hole, it'll have to be shaped in such that I can slot that through, hence that bit just there in the firewall. I need to make a neat little version of that. So I never finished welding that up, finishing it off, because it was going to happen on this day, some years later. So that's what I'm going to be working on now, and then eventually, gradually I'll work my way down and clean up everything else. So now that I've got that in, I just wanted to make sure that I got that in, there was nothing that I was missing. I've got to take all those front panels off, because they don't need to be there. They're a later project. Put those back on after I've got this thing into epoxy, got that stuff fixed and so on, and go from there. So I've got to drop that off so I've got better access. Let's see. Ground control, we have separation. What would you like? 2 beers? Coming right up. Once again, just so I can simply get things prepared for later, just here, these bolt onto, once again, different sides, but these bolt onto this point here. Now, I don't know what was originally there. I have a feeling they were actually screws, because I just took a straight blade screw out of the other side. I think that's the screw there, this screw here, out of one side. It was going in there. Now that was a pain to get to. And also I don't like using straight blade screws or screws for this anyway, so I'm going to put bolts in. So I've got these M8s, they're metric, but so be it. And I'm going to use some riv nuts. So using these holes as my locators, I'm going to put a riv nut in here, one in there, and the same on the other side. And then I'm using M8 because that's a good enough size. So the M8 bolt will come through here. You can see that there's plenty of room for adjustment. So I'll put the riv nuts in and, what am I doing? Put the riv nuts in, and then I won't forget about those later. And yeah, I'll do that sort of thing wherever I can. So just got to step draw those out, put those in, and then they can be part of the body prep. I'll actually bare metal that before I do it, just so that I can get to it more easily now rather than after the riv nuts are in. So looking at this steering column, you can see it was just a hacked ugly hole just to get it all mounted at the time. But what I want to do, what I'm going to do, is I'm going to enlarge this. I'd like to reduce this a bit as well. So I'll work out the size that I want. I wouldn't be surprised if I end up cutting a bigger piece out, patching it, and just putting in something with the shape that I'm after. What I'm doing is, where that big hole was, I'm actually just building the whole area up with masking tape for 2 reasons. One, so that I can make a bit of a template that I can peel off with the shape and the size and the contours and everything that I need. And 2, so that the hole that's there doesn't distract me from what I'm trying to work out. Because when I was looking at it, it's sort of, well, okay, I've got this, where do I start, where do I finish, and so on. So if I just get rid of it and pretend that this is all just metal, then I have a clear canvas, so to speak. And if I put enough layers of tape here, then I should be able to get it to keep the shape somewhat as well, so that when I peel it off, I can flatten it out and transfer it to a piece of metal, and then I'll know the size of it and the shape of it, and to some extent it'll hold its actual, the bend point as well. Do it. Do it. You got a rusty coloured neck, haven't you? You fit right in here. Don't you? You fit right in here. Okay, so I have fabricated that. It's obviously a funny looking shape, but it's the shape that I need. Haven't done this plate down here yet, but I also went through and I welded up, no, I did a little bit more around here. I welded up a whole bunch of little holes, and I'm going through and I'm plugging up some of the larger holes. So these ones here, I've got to be careful I don't weld up the ones I need. These ones here I don't need, for example. So what you've just seen me making is a whole bunch of, essentially, mudguard washers. If I had mudguard washers, I would have used them, but I don't. So I've just cut these. They're about 30 mil in diameter, and they're thin. They're only 1 mil or 1.2 mil. So what I'm going to do is just put them straight over the top of these and then weld around the edge, and then I'll weld in the center. And I'll just plug those holes up. I'm not worried that it's going to, that I'm lapping it. It really doesn't matter. It'll come up like this over here, and I'll just be able to put a little bit of body filler in there, and then it'll be smooth. And then obviously for holes like that, I'll make appropriate sizes and I'll put those in as well. But there's only a couple of holes in this entire firewall that I need to remain there. So there's a couple there. I've got to make sure that I don't block up a couple of the other ones. Anyway, I'll go through and I'll weld some of those in. Got just about all of those welded up. A couple more to do. Ran out of time yesterday. Finished about midnight. But they've come up really well, so I've got to grind all those off. But in the end, what I was doing, rather than cutting circles for them, because they was all different sizes, I just had a piece of sheet metal here, and I was just using my shears and just cutting something to size and shape. I'm getting pretty good at eyeballing it actually. So then blasting those in with weld. This is pretty thick sheet on this Firewall. I imagine it's probably about 18 gauge or something like that. And because it has the creases or the indentations where it goes, it's actually really, really strong. So I got no problem blasting the heat in there, which is what I've been doing rather than what I would normally do on just a normal patch repair, doing spots. It seems to take the heat well, and you know what, if it gets a little bit of distortion in there, I'm not concerned, it's a Firewall. But I think already, even without being ground or cleaned up, it's looking a lot better, a lot less like Swiss cheese. So I'm going to move my attentions down to this. I'm going to make this plate permanent, but I'm going to use this as a template so I can make up a better bracket. This is for my shifter cable. So this was a temporary thing just to get location. So I'll probably use a bit of angle iron or something, fix it onto this plate, and then weld this plate into place here and make it so that this all just disappears. And then I've got a bunch of holes down here, dipper switch and so on, holes that I need to fill. And you can see in here a lot less Swiss cheese, a lot of burn marks from the weld, and you can see the holes that I need to fill. So I'm going to continue along with that. So with this area here, and I've just gone through and put some riv nuts in for my throttle pedal. So I had tech screws in there before, holding it in place. I was satisfied with where it was, so I just enlarged the hole in the pedal a little bit to put M8s in, put some riv nuts, and so they're ready to go to hold the throttle pedal. With this, I was, as I said, just got to cut this. I was going to do a cut and butt and so on. I'm still going to do that, but I'm actually going to extend the piece right the way down the bottom here, because rather than fill, 6, 7, 8 holes, all those holes just there down the bottom, if I just extend that plate down, then I can basically just replace that whole section there, and at the same time, as I said, make that brace to hold the shifter cable. So I'll fab that up and we'll start putting that in. To keep it simple, I'm just going to sticky tape a piece of cardboard on the bottom of there to make it the size I want. I decided I will take in most of those, but I'll weld those 2 end holes up rather than remove a whole bunch of extra floor. So there's a little bit of a curvature in that. Like, it's pretty simple stuff, but I'll do it this way. It's easy enough to weld those holes up and do a compromise between the 2 ideas. Shock horror, it's raining again. Okay, I guess some people would complain if they didn't have it. So I've made that new panel, made it bigger. I've moved it down from the original point because it's sort of overlapping that shape in the body there, so unnecessarily. So I'm going to replace that whole piece. There's only one hole I'm going to have to fix up there. Got it clamped in place. I've got that clecoed in place, and what I've done is fixed the bracket to the back of it. So the clecodes, if you're not familiar with those, they're used in aeronautical construction. You drill a hole, and then you have this tool and this piece here, and it expands and contracts. So you push it in, it pulls together, put it into the hole, release it, and it stays there. It clamps it in place. So that's there. On the other side of the Firewall, I've put this bracket back on here. As I've said multiple times, I'm not going to be using that, but the reason being is now I can take this new piece off so that I can mount the new bracket onto the new piece rather than try and transfer it from the old piece and so on. So what I did before I took that original piece off, I drew a mark, an evidence mark around the outside, and then I made sure I had an up and knew where everything was. I had multiple holes there, and I worked out orientation of the bracket with those lines there. So I took the clecos out, the upper clecos out, sat this over the top, just transferred those holes onto there, drilled some holes, and then just mounted the bracket again. So it's in exactly the same place it was on that piece of steel. Now I can make the bracket on the back of it. Well, I just looked through the old scrap bin over there and I found this. So this little piece of iron here, little piece of metal, pre-bent, even got holes in it. Now look at this. Now it doesn't need to be that wide. That was just what I had. It was just a shed bracket. But check this out, will you? Same offset. Doesn't matter about the bottom. Look, it's got a hole in it just there. It's got a hole in it just there. They're about 3 millimeters difference, and I reckon I can live with that. So I'm going to weld that to this right there. But what I'm going to do in the first place is clean this up. I'm moving on to use these holes just here to do some plug welds. Why? Because I've got to fill them up anyway. Okay, let's get that done. Righto, got that tacked in place, which is all good. And to be completely honest, those tacks are probably enough to hold it, but I'm going to put some more weld. But I want to show you something. I'm using Flux core welder, a Flux core weld, and I've explained before because I haven't got any gas and we accidentally bought this wire, so I'm just using it. I'm actually becoming reasonably good at welding with it. So I don't hate it. It's messy, makes all your welds look messy. But what it really doesn't like is dirty surfaces or a bad earth. So it's really important. Any weld should be clean, should have good earth, but this stuff seems to be really sensitive. And I'll show you the main issue I find with it. I absolutely love this Uni MIG welder and I have no complaints with it. So it's not about the welder. But what happens is when the earth isn't good enough, the wire gets stuck on the weld for a moment, just a slightest little second, or less than a second. And in that time, what happens is that the rollers feed the wire through and it gets jammed. And usually it's a tangled mess. Normally it doesn't snap like that. Normally it's a tangled mess. And why it is that the flux core weld, it has flux on the inside. You have to use a knurled roller. So the bottom roller actually has little grooves in it. I don't know if this one, so this is a normal roller for normal MIG wire. It's just smooth grooves. That's where the wire gets fed through. I'm not sure if I've got one here with knurls on it. No, so the one here has knurls on it. I'll take it off and show you. Now I don't normally have to take the roller off to unjam this. I'm just doing this to show you the difference. So those little grooves, little notches there, that grabs the wire. Now if your normal MIG wire jams for a second, normally it just spins. You can adjust it and it spins, and just by adjusting the mechanisms here. I haven't worked out any way of making it so that I can make the wire spin, like just run freely like you're skidding your tyre when it jams at the other end. So what happens is with these knurls, it just keeps feeding the wire. It can't go anywhere, so it just gets jammed. So I've got a 3 metre long, it might be 4 metre long welding hose on this. So each time what happens is that I need to just fold that back, stop it unwinding over here, and then I need to pull out 3 or 4 metres of wire from one end or the other. Now you can see that wasn't stuck in the other end because it had cooled down, it was unstuck. But in the second that it was stuck, while it was still hot, was enough to jam it up. So I am not kidding, I reckon I've done that 50 times. Not just on this, just generally. So then the process is that I need to feed new wire through there and go again and hope that it doesn't happen. Keep the surface clean, have a good earth. That's the tip with flux core welding. And be prepared to have messy looking welds until you clean them up. All this splatter, so I clean that up, and all this splatter is something that you get from flux core. You can see all these little ball bearings. Now I forgot that I had it because I don't use flux core very often, it's been years. But if this tin's still okay, then this is what I'm going to be using when I weld this panel into the car. You spray this stuff all around and all those little ball bearings fall off. And the other thing is that with your flux core, you don't need the nozzle on the gun. So I've taken it off. It means you can get right in close and see what you're doing. But I do have some nozzle dip gel, and what that does, that stops all the splatter from getting stuck on the tip itself. And importantly around here, because these little holes here are for the gas when you're doing gas welding, you can get shields to prevent them getting blocked up, but I haven't got one because I don't usually do this. So that just stops that gummying up, and I put a new tip on it after the second jam as well. Okay, that sits nicely there. Time to weld it in. Got it clicate in place obviously, and I've gone around and cleaned up the edge. The amount of dust it created just to do that, I don't know if you can see it, garage is still completely full of dust just from cleaning that up. So I'm going to hold it up against the surface up the top where I can't get a cleco in. I'll spot weld it right the way around. I'll get rid of the clecos so they're out of the way of the angle grinder, and then I'll start the cut and butt. I intentionally tried to cut anything other than 90-degree corners where I could, because it just makes the heat disperse a bit better when you're welding it. I think in the perfect scenario, if you put rounded corners is good, because it allows the heat to be able to spread out evenly rather than just, you know, pocket up in one area. But this will help it disperse to reduce buckling, heat distortion, but also it just makes it a bit easier to cut in some regards as well. So I'm going to continue up here, and then I'll go up here and tack, 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 and so on until I join around. And then eventually the piece that I'm cutting of this will fall off the back with a little bit of assistance, because it's probably just got a little bit of residual tack holding it in place at the moment. So you'll see that the holes along here that we're trying to get rid of, that section and the frame around here will fall. I haven't finished welding anything, but I haven't welded across the top very much at all, because I figured it was a good time to try and get this piece here off. So what should happen is that there's the piece that I've been cutting through just separates. So let's have a look at it on the ground. So that's the piece that we've just replaced. And now what we have is this. Now that I've got that out of the way, I can come through, I'll clean up this outer edge a little bit, and I might actually continue my welding from this side. I'll put a couple of tacks up the top to pull it in line, and then I might actually do the welding on the outside for the reasons I said before. This is the site you've got to see. So, got that bracket in place, going up good. Need to fix this little bit of rust here. It's not terribly big. There's a hole here, but I'm not sure that it's rust. This is filled with lead here. I think when I've been cleaning it up, I might have gone through the lead. So when I do this, there's lead up here as well. So I'll heat that up and melt it out, but I'll melt it back out here as well and just see what's there. There is a hole there, I notice, actually, and there's a little crack just there. So that I can grind and weld up. This one I'll take out bigger, and we'll see how big that ends up. So I suspect that possibly could be rust. In fact, there's lead there, there's a joint there. I reckon there's a seam, an overlapping seam of where the pillar comes up and the top of the door joins here. I think that's a point where moisture might get trapped. This one here, I'm presuming that somehow water just got inside there, maybe condensation from the roof falling in there and not running down the pillar, which you'd think if it went there it'd run down the pillar and go down here. Okay, so I'm just going to tape off an area here, and actually I'll melt that out and then I'll tape off an area and we'll work out what I need to cut. Hopefully it's pretty simple. I should be able to cut along there, I think. Down here, I'll come back here a little bit and back up there. The spot here I've got to have a look at as well. So I'm going to be cutting out this outer section, getting into the inner section, having a look at it, replacing it, and then remaking an outer section. A little bit of it complex curve there, goes both ways, so that'll be, won't be hard, but be a little bit of work. Then we'll go on from there. Okay, so we sweated that lead out, and as I suspected, it is the seam. Didn't have to be a rocket scientist to work that one out. But you can see there was more rust there than what it appeared. So this had lead over it here, and you can see where it's gone through over there as well, for the camera would focus. So I'll do that in at least 2 pieces, probably 3. So I'll do one piece that goes here all the way down to there, and then I'll do probably that piece, and I'll do that piece separately. So bit of work to do there. Okay, so I cleaned that up a little bit, nice clean metal, and what I'm going to start in the first place is just to cut out right on this edge here so that I can weld it and grind it, but I'm not expecting that that's as far as I'll go. That's the wishful thinking in me, but I'd suspect I'm going to have to come around a bit further. But I've gone right the way back to where that join is, because there's that spot. There's no point trying to keep that little bit. And I'm going to cut right underneath that edge there. So it should be a pretty simple piece, just as long as it doesn't extend out too far, but we will see. So we'll get onto that. Well, that doesn't look too bad. I cut it out, filed the edges off it. It's very thin metal, but I think it actually was originally very thin metal. So yeah, it'll be interesting to weld, but I'm pretty sure that I've got sound metal right the way through. There's a weld there from the join. This is good, and it's good through there, so I don't think that'll be any dramas. Hopefully this one will be similar. I suspect I might end up just doing this whole bit through here, like that. And that's what all the lead looks like when it falls out. Could make a sinker. Bit cold here today, but I'll survive. So I got a piece of scrap metal, and this is a little bit curved, so I cut it to a bit of a curve, and then I've beaten some shape into it so that it comes around this corner. Now this is where the 2 pieces have been joined, so it's not a consistent height through there where it's been welded and then it was filled with solder. So it's a little bit of a funky join, but I'll live. So that's going to go in there, and what I'm going to do is weld, I'll tack weld along the top, along the sides here, and I'll get all this perfectly lined up, and then I'll do a cut and butt along here. So I'll cut through this piece and I'll cut through this piece so that they fit in. And I can actually get my fingers in here to pull out the piece that I cut out. What I am going to do is remove a little bit more from the corner in the first place so that I can get that pushed back exactly where it needs to be. So I'm going to get on to cutting that and welding it, and we'll have a look when it's done. I've discovered that apparently it helps if you turn the camera on when you're trying to film. So anyway, I've got a heap of weld packed in there. And one thing I'll say is, if you want a confidence boost with your welding, don't try and weld old metal with flux core above your head, because you're not going to feel good about it at the end. But what I've got, so most importantly, you can see the piece of metal's looking right. I've got a fair bit of metal in there, a fair bit of weld in there, so I'm going to clean it up. So I'm not going to touch that because it's hot, but this bit here is got a nice curved arris. So what I'm going to do is use a grinding disc to get in there, and I'll run that through just to get that shape happening. It's a really nice radius for that sort of thing. This here, I'll use this disc like that, just using the tip of it, and I'll come back with a flat disc and a small angle grinder with a 40 grit on it later. But I haven't finished welding yet. There's a couple of little holes. So rather than just keep building on top of what's there, I'm going to grind this to where I want it, and then I'll look for the holes and I'll fill those in. But this is looking okay. It's coming up well, and then I can do this part. What I did do though was when I cut out this piece, the little slither, I went to grab it and it fell down the A-pillar. So I'm hoping that I can dig it out later, otherwise there might be a little bit of a rattle in there. That's okay. I'll grind this up and we'll keep going. Got that piece done and it's come up okay. So I'm happy enough with that. A little bit of bodywork, sure disappear. Now I've got this other one over here, and what we have is got this flat surface here, and then this flat but curved surface here, and then there's a little piece just there. If I do a dotted line, sort of goes like that. It continues on down here. So this piece curves, changes shape and so on. Piece next to it, and then this piece. So I'm not going to try and make that up in one piece. I'll probably 3 pieces. I think I'll do 3 pieces. What I'll do, I'll concentrate, I'll have this main section through here, and I'll weld a piece on for that and shape it, and I'll make that corner. And then I'll make this little piece here. It's sort of triangular. And when I cut it out, I'm coming down a little bit further here because I'm not going to cut it out until I'm ready. I'm going to take it down a bit further because I suspect there'll be some creep through there. And hopefully I manage to take out enough when I do that. I might actually make my pieces a little bit longer just in case. And I'm going to cut right back here to where that weld is, and that way I've got something solid to weld onto. There's still lead contaminating this. When I was welding this stuff, there was just lead that I wasn't able to get out of the surface, and it was just contaminating my weld, and it makes it really unpleasurable, is the best way to put it, without swearing. So I'll cut a little tab like that, and then we'll look at that one, and we'll come back to that one. I ended up doing this piece twice because the first time I cut it a bit small, and then I've put this piece in here. It's got little dents. So what I did, I sort of hammer formed it. I put it over the existing stuff, welded it in a couple of spots, and then hammer formed it. But what needs to be remembered is that from about here through to here was previously leaded. So it was a funny sort of a joint. So I'm going to put fiberglass reinforced body filler through there in place of the lead, and that'll clean it all up. But overall, it's all metal and there's shape. There is, a bit hard for me to show you, but there is some rust on the inner edge, like that edge over there. There is some rust in there, so I'll cut that out as a separate thing, but all this outer structure's good, repaired and solid. And then there was a little piece of rust just here. What I did was I cut it out, I peeled the outer layers back, scraped it all out, ground it, put wire brush in there, everything I possibly could. And this is the next day. I've gone through and I rust converted inside there, and then I've just welded a little patch in there. So in fact, I've put rust converter on quite a few things. A lot of it will be sanded back off again, but because I had the opportunity, mainly in areas where it's hard to get to all of the remaining surface rust, even in little gaps like this. So I've just done that, and as I said, most of the stuff that you see on the surface will sand back off again, but there's little holes and things that I've tried to get. So that's all good. Now what I'm about to do is move along to a new spot. Hope you're enjoying the video so far. So why don't you pause, go and have a bathroom break, but when you come back, don't forget to subscribe and like and comment and share it with a friend, because it'll help me. And you need to go to the loo, because that cold adult beverage has probably taken effect by now. Then come back. Don't forget to keep watching. And while I think of it, a couple of days ago, I actually went through and I re-scrubbed the entire truck with phosphoric acid, and I ended up using a 2-to-1, so a stronger mix, and really got into everything. You can see it's got this sort of goldish sort of verdigris to it, I guess. Looks pretty cool, I reckon, actually. So other than the door jamb on this side and the bit below where the body line folds there on the firewall, I've got everything completely stripped. So just working away, and once again I put the phosphoric acid on it to try and preserve it for a while. So I'm really happy with that. I can now work away without worrying about it surface rusting in the meantime. And this is the area we're going to work on now. So this cab corner, so I've shown it before. You can see there's some cut marks here. All this is prior to me. Cut marks, this is bent out of shape here. There's the obvious rust. The other side needs a little bit of work, but it has a little bit of an example of what I need to do. So it's got a return on it down here, which has been flattened out or missing or something on this side. So what I'll do in the first place is clean it up a little bit, and then I'll straighten out obvious things that I can. I'll fold this back around, and it's a bit bent through there, so all of this part here has been bent under as well as rusted. So I'll either straighten this and fix it, or I'll replace all of that as the cab corner, and I'd say I'll probably end up doing something like that. But I'll do some reparative work before I get into actually refabricating. There's an inner skin and an outer skin here as well, I believe, so we'll be working on 2 sections. So I straightened this out, welded up those little bits, cleaned up the edge, tapped it in a bit, and cut off a little bit of excess. I don't know if this is supposed to come down, and it doesn't look like it is. The other side's the same. It's hard to tell, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to do as I've done. So I've just rolled this edge around, which is what the other side has. This, I don't know, maybe it's meant to transition a bit more smoothly or something, and I'll probably grind it so that it just sort of follows that line. I guess it doesn't need to have this 90 on it. At the end of the day, it's never going to be seen again, but I'll clean it up. And I hammer and dollied this out a bit just to get some shape, cut off the piece that was obviously rubbish, and then I made up a template. So I've got this, and I've used masking tape just to add a little bit on the extra, on the bottom for a bit that comes around the corner there, and I've allowed a bit just here as well for the same thing. So that will come on something like that. I'll go and cut this out of metal. I've made a bit of a curve on the edge. Main reason I think it'll just work better because there's a curved panel to have the edge of this curved through here. I think it'll just make it easier to transition it in there. So we'll cut that out of metal. It's got some curve in it here. I'll just very quickly roll a bit of curve into it over whatever I can find, and then we will bend these flanges on it here and here. And then once we've got those, then I can cut it out off here to what I've made, rather than cut this off and then try and fit it in there. I'll get this, overlay it, may even do the cut and butt technique, and we'll go from there. But we'll have a look at that. Well, that's one less thing to do. One new cab corner. So I don't think that came up too badly. There is a dent just here, up the top there, just out of camera view, which you can see now that it's sanded. So just here. And there is a slight little bit of change in height through here. I don't want to keep grinding, so I'd prefer put a smear of body filler over the top of it than to grind the weld down and weaken it. But it's going to have body filler anyway. That's just inevitable. So that was a good thing, and that's perfectly good. There isn't an inner skin, which was good, and the piece of metal came out in the process there. So other than using the shrinker on my stretcher shrinker there, which I could have done just banging away, but I figured it's silly, I've got one. Now that was all just using pretty basic sort of tools, I think, and a piece of metal that I had lying around. So it is cold rolled 1.15 mild steel, but you could use a shelf like Fitzy does. So pretty happy with that. It's one less thing on the list. Working my way around, just filling in little holes and things. So there was a large hole and then about 6 or 7 small holes there. There was some bolts that had been snapped off, so I've just sort of welded that floor plate in place in various places. And this area here, so I had replaced all this section through here, and in fact on the floor here is the piece that I replaced. It was one of the first things I ever did to this, and I'd never quite finished it, so to fit this onto the 1-tonner chassis, what I had to do was release this panel just here, which would normally go down to the running board, so that I could, doesn't want to come out at the moment, but so that it could pull out. And I don't know exactly where it's supposed to go with this not being on the chassis, but I know that rather than being straight up and down, this will kick out a bit. It's completely unnoticeable and doesn't interfere with the door. But when I replaced all this section, including this, I never quite finished it. So this was broken off here from the door being folded back too far, and I've still got to fix that on both sides. There's a bit of a wallow through here, and that had broken off, so I welded that, just stitched up this. Now there's a little piece missing from here I have never seen it. I don't know what it's supposed to look like, but all I'm going to do is, this height here is different to this height. So I'm just going to get a little piece of metal, put it in there like that. I'll put a little return lip on it here. I'm just going to take it from this point through to that point, just to neaten it up. And I may put a return on it, a flange like this has, just to give it a bit of extra strength there. I think I will. But I'll make this piece and then I'll weld a piece on the bottom. So we have our piece here, and this piece here will sit underneath the various shapes here. So that will just go up there like that. I'll tack that in place. I'll do a little bit of banging it into shape when it's in place, but otherwise I'll weld that all around. Okay, got all that done. And as I said, I'll bring this piece to where it needs to go once I know where it needs to go. So we've got that, and we've got this indentation through here, which I've put in intentionally because the guard was interfering with that a little bit when it was trying to go in, and I noticed that when I replaced that section, I hadn't allowed for that. And if you look there, you can see that indentation. So that's what I've had to put on through there. Now on the other side, so we'll see that down here, we've got quite a similar thing going on. I've done less work on this side, obviously, but you can see that panel that I made, and I had to belt it with a hammer back in the day, so to get it to fit, so I'll tidy that up a bit. But you can see all this part here, so this is the part that needs to be put on down here, which has been removed. I don't think I did it, but I could have. I can't remember. And got to finish this section of the mudguard off here. So the other side, I didn't have to do that this time around, but I'll take this right up to here somewhere, I think. I actually can't remember why I didn't do that when I did that. I think because the door was still on it and I couldn't get access to it, so I did where I could. So we'll play around with that, get that bit done. Looks like there's a bit of work going on over here as well. So we'll do that and we'll have a little bit of an investigate. And I've just got to belt a bit of weld into this. I think I'll get myself started on that one. Crack is fixed. And I know I've still got to do this area down here like I did on the other side, and I need to put a light behind here, but I know there's a couple of little spots of rust, tiny little holes of rust, which will no doubt blow out a bit, so I'll have to look at those. But what I've just done is cut off the welds that hold on this panel that goes under here, between here and the running board. As I said, I've already done that at the front because I needed to do that to stretch it over the chassis. But there's actually only about 3 or 4 welds, short beads of weld holding this on, so if I keep doing this enough, it'll probably just fall off anyway. What I am going to do is cut this section out. I think I will cut this little bit of weld off here to peel the cab corner off to get a bit of access and also so I can see behind there. And then just go through and do a pretty simple repair on this. Looks like there's a couple of overlapping pieces of metal there. Probably this door jamb and then something from inside to give it a bit more structure. So I'll cut it apart and see and repair what has to be done. There's bound to be more hiding behind. Looks pretty good through there, but we'll see. And then we'll move on to this part over here. What this area is revealing is this. This here, this is part of the cab mount through here. So it comes down, it's structural, comes across, there's a triangulated brace. It was full of soil. So all that soil and rust and so on, most of it was in the back of here. Some of it was in between this and this piece. So what we have is, this has been cut off here, obviously, the piece of metal that comes down there. And that was the first piece we were looking at, which was like this. So I took that out, expecting to see a bit worse than this, to be honest, so I'm happy with that. Didn't realise that was such a thick structural piece. But then I noticed, so you got this nice neat seam here, and you can see where I've had to bend it back, cut holes in it and so on. I was using a spot weld drill, which was absolutely useless. It was new, I hadn't used it before, and it's got blade teeth on one side and teeth on the other side, so it's got like a center point thing here, and it's got teeth there, and you can turn it around, got teeth there. I drilled 1 hole before all the teeth came off the first side, and then I think I drilled 2.5 holes before they all came off the second side. Absolutely rubbish. So I went through, and what I would normally do is just use a normal drill bit and then a larger drill bit to finish it off without going through the back. So the reason for that was, the reason for the spot weld drill is so that you don't drill a hole through both sections, makes it easier to repair it. Well, that's not going to be happening in that way. So this piece here I saw had rust just inside the fold. It had a little bit of rust, and a little bit of rust is enough rust to cause more problems. So it had to come out. put a cut in up the top here to release it. So it is part of the pillar, of the B pillar here. So it goes down and attaches, comes down, just had a couple of spot welds onto that brace, and then the cab corner came around and it was on the outside. So the B pillar was on the inside, cab corner came through it, just had half a dozen spot welds down through there. So this is literally just a piece of the bottom of the A pillar. So you can see where it was there. So what I am going to do is patch it as best I can without removing this whole cab corner. It's held on in plenty of other places here. I'm going to be returning it, but I'm not going to be able to weld right the way through there because it's, what do we got? Maybe 30 mil wide, an inch, something like that. I'm not going to go cutting this cab corner apart so I can get in and weld that piece on and then repair the cab corner. It just seems like going backwards for something that I don't feel is doing that much work. But I will put it on and I will weld it. So I'll weld it to where my finger is there and around here and around there. So it will still be attached, it'll come down there, and I'll have it so that it does return around the corner so that I can reattach the cab corner to it. So I think it'll be just fine. It's like the cab corner still got plenty of strength even with that removed, and the pillar will be the same. So I guess in an ideal world you'd remove all of the corner just so that you can finish that inch of weld and then put the cab corner back on. This is not a perfect weld and I'm not a perfect person. But what I'm going to do is go through and clean all this stuff up as best I can. I was getting my air saw in there and basically cleaning up the surfaces as best I could. And anything. I was using my air chisel to vibrate it, to get stuff out. Anything I could use to release the rust and the soil. And you can see, if it focuses in there, it still looks pretty horrible, but it's actually pretty solid metal in there. So I'm going to give this as good a clean up as I can. Then I'm going to put rust converter in the places I can get into. Then I'll make a patch panel and start putting it back together. As they say, you've got to break a couple of eggs to make an omelette. So I'm prepared to make a ridiculous amount of mess and get covered in dust for the sake of blowing off as much as I can of the rust and so on. Got into a few areas. So I prepared this area over here as well. So internally, because I've got to jump in and repair that bit in there. Get to be a fair bit of picking, unpicking, cutting and so on in that area. But that's okay, one piece at a time. So rust converter time, and let's start making some patch pieces. So I need to replace this and rebuild it down to here. So that's one piece. But then on the inside of the cab, I have a bit more going on. So there's this outer skin, but then it carries through to some inner layers as well. So I've got to just strategically work my way through that. What I've done is got some cardboard and I've made a piece that I think is the shape where it needs to go. And as best I can, I'm trying to find the line of the door, because I think that's an important line. And I've made it from here. I've taken a bit further than what I'd already cut out. around here and around the corner. I've just got it taped in place. Now that I've got that shape, what I'm going to do is get a separate piece of card, and I've started with it, and just going to hold that to the same starting point at the top and tape it in place so that it sits following that curve of the bottom of the A-pillar. And I'm not going to try and do this one-handed, but then I'll run a marker down that side and trim up that piece of card. And then the last one that I'll have to do will be the piece that goes down here, which should be pretty straightforward. That's the shape of it. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to build this little piece that I'm replacing out of 3 pieces of metal, the same shape as the piece of cardboard that I've got there, and I'll weld them together. So I'll go through that process. A little bit of art and craft later, and this is what I've got. So I have the 3 individual pieces. I'm not going to try and cut the pieces to this size in the first place. This one I will make it a little bit longer so I've got room to play with. This one here, I'll get the curve on the back of it right, but I'll leave it overhanging the front so that I've got room to play with. And this one here, I'll get it right down in there, but I'll make it, probably leave it too long this way. That way, once it's in place, I can trim it to shape rather than wish that I'd made it a millimetre or 2 bigger. So I'll take that piece off, and I've only roughly taped it so that I can pull it apart pretty easily, but I know the pieces, so I'll mark them, the front and the top and so on, so I don't get them mixed up. But that's what we have there. Now I also need to rebuild the bottom of the A-pillar itself. So this is technically all part of the mudguard, or this part of the cab I should say, that I'm working on here. So we'll get that piece out of the way, but what you can see is 3 pieces of metal. You can see it's roughly a rectangle, but I'm not going to try and make it out of one piece because that would be too challenging for me. But I do need to extend this part here, which is the bottom of the A-pillar, just below the pocket, hinge pocket. I've got to extend it down to here somewhere and around. I've already done that on the other side. That's a thicker steel, so I'll do that in 2 pieces. One piece coming down here, one going across there, and it's got a return on the back of it as well, so I've got to play around with that. So I'll get that made, I'll put that in place, then we'll get back to this one. As I said, I'll bring it back. So I've extended onto the bottom of this. What I did, I returned it around the back also, and it's got a bottom on it. So plenty of strength in there, fit for purpose. So now I can go about fabricating those other pieces. So that'll hold all that together. So what I have done, I welded this piece on, then I welded this piece on. I had to trim this one down to length across here. Then I welded that curvy bit on, and then the flat bit. So that's come up really well. I tacked it in place along here to get the shape so that I could get this one and then this one. Now I've just cut through the tacks and this should release pretty easily. I did make a mistake earlier though, and that's when I repaired this A-pillar. I made the piece longer than I need to. and forgot about that, and I welded it on longer than I needed to. So what I've had to do is cut off 10 mil off the bottom. So once I get this off, I'll cut it off and I'll just have to box in the bottom of it again. So a little bit of wasted effort, but that's okay. So I'll take this off and then we will weld it all up, grind it off and get ready to install it. And this is what we've got. So you can see it's got all that shape to it and everything. I've tried to square this corner off to match that one as best I can. This flange I've got in there. And what I did was I welded the back of this part here, really packed the weld in. And the reason being is that I ground this corner off on an angle so that I could fill it up with weld again and then shape it, because I didn't want to have the seam, the join of the two bits of metal through there visible, so it could crack. So that's plenty strong enough. I've left some bits on the end here because they need to be shaped around the bottom. But this piece will go in there. I do need to adjust it a bit. The shape changed a little bit as I was welding it, and that's okay. So that will go in like that, and then what I'll do, I'll weld it in spots that line up, and this curved bit just here is sitting out a little bit, so I'll be able to just bang that with a hammer, and then I'll finish the flange on the bottom off. Before I weld it in, I'm going to paint the back of it with some weld through primer. I'll throw some weld through primer in here, and then I'll go and have a cup of coffee and let that dry for a little while. And there we have it, one lower A-pillar corner done. So I boxed in underneath there again, got it all sorted, got the guard folding over onto the bottom of that,
And this is obviously all the section I replaced in the first place, and then this part here. So a little bit of work involved in all that, and I'm more than happy with it. It's really solid. My guard should be able to fit on in the way that it's supposed to, with that bit down there. Bit of fiberglass filler, a little bit of seam sealer in the necessary places, and we'll be good. And you know, once again, I've just tried to make it look as it was, but I will be seam sealing all of this for reasons I've explained before. As far as this pillar goes, it's just the bit inside now that I need to do from inside the cabin. It's going to be uncomfortable and awkward because I'm going to be working in there, and there's a fair bit to do, so we'll see. I'm just slowly working my way around the cab to fix up any little bits that I've seen. I'd previously done that crack. This corner needed a bit of work, and I've still got to fill in a couple little spots there, but it had a split through this bit here, or a cut, and then there was a rust hole just over here, and it had a bit of a dent in there, so I sort of tried to kill a few birds with one stone there. I welded this up. I banged some timber in there and a solid block of brass after cleaning out the hole, which ended up being about big as the end of my finger there. And rather than try and put a plate in there, I bashed a piece of brass in there, or bronze actually, and then just kept filling it with weld. So it's all just weld. And what that was also doing was pumping a bunch of heat in here. Now this is a really strong area, so I'm not worried about distortion. But while I had it all pushed out, I'm hoping that the heat helped to just take out some of the drumminess. That may or may not work, but I didn't figure it could hurt. I knew that there was a spot here, and if you notice these bits of tape, as I find things, I just stick bits of tape on the cab so that it reminds me that I've got to do something. At this point in time, I'm working on rust repairs and stuff like that, so that's what most of the tape is, but there are some things that remind me of other things. It's just, just to remind me. So I can see there's a strip through here that's rusted, and when I was looking, I could see this as well. Now the best way for me to identify that is by putting a light on the other side and waiting for the light to shine through. And then you can see where those areas are. So I had an area down here, can't see it. Yeah, so I'm just working my way around there. So they're the ones I'm going to work. I'll clean up this side. There's all this gooey anti-rattle sound deadener stuff. I'll clean all that up because it just keeps contaminating the weld. And then hopefully I can put another piece of bronze in the back there. In fact, that one just there. I don't think I actually ever brought this back onto camera. So this is the bottom of the B pillar that I'd started. I showed cutting it out, I never showed finishing it up. So that all came up very well. That's good. I just realised I need to box in underneath like I did on the A pillar, but other than that, it's all good. So what I've also done is I've started on the bottom of the A pillar there on the inside, and you can see that I have cut out the rusted section, and in fact I've cut out a couple of layers. I've gone through and used every tool that I can imagine, wire wheels, die grinders, my panel saw, just to try and get out any rust, surface rust, loose rust, flaking rust, and cut out the sections. Now, the piece that you see missing there continues down past the floor underneath, and it's only a tiny little piece, and I've actually got a clear run through there. So this is not going to be hard. What you'll also notice is that I've rust converted everything. This is a couple of days later. So anything in here, I don't intend to bare metal any of this. It just had surface rust. So I've just done this just to control it. And what I really did was try to concentrate on getting the rust converter into any seams anywhere. And I've got right up under the dash. A bit hard to see. And I also got inside the cavities. So I'm pretty convinced that if there was any rust here, I've cut it out. Other than that, I've cut it out and repaired it, or surface rust I have converted and tried to prevent it. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to give this another coat. There will be sound deadener, carpet, all that sort of stuff over this, but I'll give it another coat because I just think it helps. Just out of interest,
this area here, I had actually used a strip disc and got most of it back to bare metal with some remnant surface rust and some remnant pieces of paint. Whereas this side, I didn't do that. And you can see the difference in how it has come up. And that piece there was actually new metal. And you can see it doesn't really do much to new metal unless it's got a bit of rust on it. Well, I'm going to get onto this, and then it occurs to me that unless I'm mistaken, that rust up there above the driver's head is the only rust remaining in this cab that isn't going to be addressed in some other way. So what I mean by that is, got the dash, not going to work on that because I need to get my demister sorted out, so that'll be fixed at that stage. And then there is some little spots in areas on the windscreen surround, for example, but that will be fixed when I widen that flange for my urethaned glass. So I'm pretty satisfied that this thing, other than those things, is 100% rust free, which is pretty satisfying. Okay, so I have my pieces ready to go, and as you may imagine, it didn't just happen on the first piece. I had to make some templates and made a couple of pieces. The first inner piece I made was a little bit small, but I enlarged it, but that's okay. So what we've got is 2 layers. I haven't got anything welded in, but this one sits in here and it will be attached to this remaining metal here. I intentionally left that there to weld onto. So it'll tuck in there. And I've got it weld through primed, copper rich weld through primed on the inside. So that goes like that. And this larger piece just here, I'll weld through prime or put some sort of primer on that after I weld it. But then this one, it'll go through in here and it becomes an outer skin. And what it does also, I've got to tap it down a bit, but what it does also is that it picks up the hole that returns underneath the cab, and it's only about that big. So I've cleaned up all the metal underside and so on. So I'll just go through. I'm just going to lap this. I'm not going to try and cut and butt it because there'll be a kick panel or something here, so I'm not worried about a slight difference in the height just there, or the way it sticks out. But the reality is there's new metal here. There will be new metal on the inside, puts the structure back in, and most importantly, takes the rust out. So I'll get that welded in, cleaned up, and I'll show you once that's all done. Just in the blink of an eyelid. All done. Inner and outer patch sections done and ground back, and then I've sprayed some epoxy primer inside the pocket that you can see there, and in the hinge pocket. It actually isn't epoxy primer, it's etch primer. So pretty by no means, but everything that was replaced has been welded, and then some holes been filled, and then ground as best as I could to get in there. Let's face it, the hinge goes in there, and then etch primed. And then we have the underneath section. Still got to tidy up all underneath here, but you can see there, tidy up like the rest of the floor, that is. So you can see the piece that I've put in there. So that ties all of this together. So essentially we've rebuilt everything in this area. Now it's a pretty important area because this is actually our cab mount. So this is where our cab gets mounted to our subframe. So it's important that everything here is strong, and I'm convinced now that everything here is strong. So we are happy. And of course what that means is that piece of blue tape can go. Well, there's no time like the present. So I think I might attack this section. I think I'm just going to cut this whole section out and replace it. There's a second skin that's behind there, so part of the door jamb, and I think it's part of the roof or something that comes under there. So I'll be careful only to cut through the front bit, and then if I need to do something with the back bit, I'll do that as well. It's obviously like a box sort of section through there that's been built. So I'll cut through here. There's probably some spot welds or something. I'll just put in a simple piece of metal, and I'll look at that as a separate bit. Almost there. And just like that, we are rust free. Woohoo! No more rust. Apart from that bit. almost no more rust. 100% no more rust, apart from that rust. Well, once again, thanks for joining me. I'm really impressed, really happy with the progress that I've made on FrAnKeNInTER's cab, and really pleased to know that it's 100% rust free, apart from the bit that isn't. So, as far as the bit that isn't, the demister needs to be done. I need to extend this so I can put my urethane installed flush glass in, and I need to work on the doors so I can have single piece glass and the fast glass mechanisms. Also got to tidy up around the steering column, weld up a few holes here and there. And then I've got a bunch of stuff to do to the mud guards and bonnet and so on. That stuff I probably won't go too much video on those because, let's face it, it's just bodywork. But all of that detailed stuff, I will definitely be filming that. And that will probably be the next couple of videos, I would say. So once again, really appreciate you spending some time with me. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that you got something out of it. And just a reminder, if you did, please, all this business, you know what I'm saying. So until that time, why don't you stay safe, and why don't you go and pick up a spanner, a die grinder, a paintbrush, an air blower, whatever it is, and do some work on your project. Because as I've said before, it ain't going to build itself. So until that time, you stay safe, and I'll catch you then. Thanks for joining me. No, I'm absolutely serious. Turn the video off and go and do some work on your project right now.